With the new feature of Weapon Mastery in Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, you're allowed to use any weapon from any specialization on any other specialization from that class. Yes, even core builds. In PvP, you already get access to this automatically, as long as you have the relevant expansions unlocked, as well as Secrets of the Obscure. But to get this otherwise, you just need to get a few first quests of the main storyline done of the expansion, and then speak to Frode. But how interesting is this ability to use these new weapons? And is it more interesting than elite specializations in general? I'd say it's definitely not as interesting, but it's much more balanced, and for sure at some point they needed to stop adding new elite specs. There's already way more class customization than any other MMO out there, but does it really provide more customization to allow any spec to use any weapon? Because the identity and trade-offs of each weapon forced build-making decisions, since things like the powerful shortbow of the Renegade were balanced by the fact you needed to play a Renegade to use it. Now without those limitations, you can just run the most powerful specs with the most powerful weapons, and while not having much synergy between them because those weapons were designed in the context of a certain class specialization, you still have something very powerful, but maybe not so fun. If you're playing for the meta, then there will always be one singular most powerful option, and that isn't changing anytime soon. But for those who want to play something new and fun, the Weapon Mastery does add quite a few options to a few classes. So besides the most obvious options, like throwing the Catalyst Hammer or the Vindicator's Greatsword or Renegade Shortbow on any other build, which are certainly powerful but in my opinion pretty boring, in this video I'll be going over the most interesting Weapon Mastery combinations I've experienced so far that add some new synergy or playstyles. The most interesting one to me is a Catalyst Elementalist that uses Sword and Warhorn, which are both originally from the Weaver and Tempest, and when you don't have the Weaver specialization, you don't have to deal with dual attunements, which also means you lose access to some of the better sword skills, to be honest. So I could definitely see using a dagger or scepter here instead, but what really matters is using the Catalyst Elite skill, which refreshes the cooldowns of the weapon you're wielding, and in air attunement, you can use 2 lightning orbs, which do massive damage, and on top of that, the Catalyst can provide you with much more damage modifiers than a Tempest could. So when you're ready for some huge bursts, you can use Cyclone and Lightning Orb, Elemental Celerity to recharge, and then do them both again. And if the prophecy comes true and both Lightning Orbs land their full damage, nothing survives. Mesmer is the next class I'll be looking at, and it's not just a single build or synergy because Weapon Mastery probably helped Mesmers the most because many of their builds lacked good weapon options. You often used traits to deal damage instead of weapons to deal damage, or had one good weapon set, but not a good option for your weapon swap. Especially on condition Mesmer builds, they often use Sword as a utility option, which didn't have any condition application, or Scepter, which is a bit slow, or Staff, which is too defensive. So now with the Mirage's Axe on a Chronomancer or even on a Virtuoso, they can play a bit more aggressively with the port to the target and the extra clone generation and Torment, all within just 2 skill investment. This isn't just great for PvP, it's also a great DPS option for raids and strikes. You'll see this a lot in PvE as well. You just put the highest damaging weapons on a DPS build and use the spec with the most damage modifiers and you're good to go. But that's not all for Mesmer. The shield offers a good defensive option to non-Chronomancer builds. Usually the Torch plays this role in most builds because of the stealth, and that still is a good option, but now shield provides a tankier but more direct approach, which can be better in larger fights. Then there's the Virtuoso's Dagger, which isn't really interesting even with the Virtuoso traits. However, when given the Mirage's ability to use ambush skills when they dodge, there's a new skill added for the Dagger Ambush. This ambush is a ranged daze, and it does decent damage as well, but when you combine this with some traits like Infinite Horizon that makes your clones also shoot dazing projectiles, and then you take domination traits like Power Block that synergize with interrupts, you just constantly interrupt the target and basically permanently lock them down. If anything is going to get nerfed, just for the health of this game, I'd say it's this. The next most interesting class in this expansion I'd say is Guardian. The Dragon Hunter's longbow feels like it really belongs on the Dragon Hunter because landing the tether really helps you to land all of the longbow attacks, and as a willbender, you don't really want to be at range. You want to be in melee where you can place your willbender flames on your enemy, and a longbow firebrand, I don't know about that. So you probably still want to be a Dragon Hunter if you're using a longbow. However, the firebrand's axe and the willbender's offhand sword are pretty nice for all specs. Even though willbenders want to use all swords for the most damage, it makes their damage predictable and susceptible to counter pressure. But if you take an axe and a focus instead of a greatsword, the focus gives you some range damage, blocks for defense, then the axe pull, which allows you to set up your burst, and putting an offhand sword on a Dragon Hunter just feels good for the class fantasy. But you could have an axe sword Dragon Hunter, which means you have an immobilize and a pull to yoink your enemies into your traps and immobilize them there. These are just the first impressions here, and I don't think I've seen the entire picture yet, but to me at least it seems that these three classes, the Ellie, the Mesmer, and Guardian, seem to be benefiting the most from these weapon changes. Maybe that's because I'm thinking the expansion that revolves around arcane magic should benefit the most arcane of classes, but I'm just not seeing the Ranger, Engineer, Thief, and Warrior having really good options here. But I'm also just one person. I'm sure you all have your own ideas for interesting weapon and class combinations, and I'd love to hear them in the comments. Don't expect them to be updated immediately, but when things settle down, you'll be able to find all of the most popular and fun builds, as always, on guildgen.com. So if you enjoyed this content, like the video, subscribe, and I'll be checking out runes and relics next time.